Can we hold a moment of silence for all the ones we lost to genocide on Turtle Island for simply being indigenous? Seguli, de gahliose niungets. Wagwaho kalet genyot de ag. Hello, my name is Dea Gahlios. I am Oneida and Wolf Clan. I just introduced myself in my indigenous language, Honyot Da'ag. Honyot Da'aga means people of the standing stone, and that is our original name. Indigenous languages provide identity, ceremony, and traditional knowledge that are all components of unique healthcare systems within each nation. Indigenous languages have been targeted for elimination through boarding schools and brutal policies in Indian affairs. Still, many people cannot see the correlation between suicides in indigenous communities and lack of language speakers. Many of our communities face high rates of suicide, and language revitalization can help prevent suicide. Our cultures provide the original instructions with ancient teachings to live in balance and harmony with the natural world. In healing the traumatic aftermath of genocidal assimilation, language revitalization is the key to restoring cultures and identities. A culture will not survive without the mother language. Christopher E. Lalonde from the University of Victoria and Darcy Hollett from Memorial University of Newfoundland researched more than 150 Indigenous communities in British Columbia, finding that communities with low levels of language knowledge had suicide rates 6 times higher. This research was one of the first of its kind, and it's long overdue. We need more than modern healthcare centers to address suicide in Indigenous communities. If we do not have an Indigenous approach to combat suicide with our rights being upheld, then institutions like the healthcare system can cause more harm than help, as they cannot always see the underlying problems. The after effects of intergenerational trauma and the trauma Indigenous peoples may face every day are often misbelieved or mislabeled, therefore targeting the wrong culprits, causing false diagnoses, and often forcing medications or institutions in replacement of healing the true nature of the illnesses Indigenous peoples face. Indigenous languages create identity and relationships with the natural world in a cultural context that cannot be achieved in any other way. Our ceremonies are our livelihood and center around our relationship with the natural world. When we restore our ceremonial ways, it creates a balanced lifestyle and opportunities for healing intergenerational trauma from the history of genocidal assimilation. Language is the key to this cultural restoration. I am passionate about this topic because I have felt an empty hole in my chest when I did not have my language. This is a yearning that only knowing and speaking my language can fulfill. My Indigenous language. I have found my search of who I am through knowing my indigenous language, and it has provided me with traditional knowledge that I could not receive anywhere else. Too many of my relatives committed suicide. We have to look at the bigger picture. Everything we need has been provided for us. If we return to our ways, we will find what we need to live on this earth. It is also our responsibility to take care of this earth. And it's the traditional knowledge of the indigenous peoples that can teach the world how. Our indigenous languages hold the key to our cultural identity and relationships with the natural world through oral stories that are passed on from generation to generation. There are only 30 fluent Oneida language speakers left, and there were more than 300 when I was born. Our language was deliberately stripped from our communities through genocidal assimilation, and the responsibility falls on our generation to revitalize what we can, although it is not our fault. Storytelling is a form of traditional education, teaching us how we fit into this universe. Elders pass on our cultural values, ethical virtues, and traditional knowledge through stories. This brings forth self-knowledge along with communal and societal knowledge. Western educational systems challenge stories as merely myths, while pushing a colonialistic nature of institutionalized thinking. Indigenous stories in themselves are a lot more complex than these educational systems and have a lot to offer. Stories are a mirror of our lives, showing truth through paradoxes. Stories are the language of the psyche that helps one navigate through life. When translating these stories from indigenous languages into English, much of the cultural context is lost in translation, resulting in a false translation. Indigenous languages have knowledge in them, and it would be a shame to lose the meanings of these stories when only telling a translated version. According to James Antone, born in London, Ontario, raised as a fluent speaker, the translated stories are completely different.